Reduciéndose. Para hablar de ello contamos a esta hora con Colin Graham, responsable de estrategias multiactivos de Robeco. Colin, thank you so much for your time and for giving this interview to Negocios Televisión.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Colin, according to Robeco's monthly outlooks, surging oil prices raises recession risk. However, there are mitigating effects at play as crude prices soar following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So we have to understand that higher oil price are likely to lead to recession.
Yeah, that's a great question, and a lot of people are trying to figure out a good answer for that. If you look back through history, you can see that when oil prices rise over 100% over a 12-month period, that generally leads to a slower economic growth and sometimes recession. So if you look back at 1992 in terms of the first Gulf War, if you look at the rise in oil prices in 99, and then you had the TMT bubble burst, you also saw oil prices up at $130 in 2008, just before the global financial crisis. So from that perspective, then, rising oil prices do have a drag on economic growth. But in this circumstances, we can see that the energy intensity of economies is much lower than it has been in the past. The US consumer is much, much better placed now than it was in previous cycles in terms of household balance sheets are very strong. So from that perspective, there are mitigating circumstances as to why higher oil prices don't necessarily lead to recessions. The one area that I would be, and that's changed over the last couple of weeks, is that US interest rates are going up. So that's another headwind you have to think about for the US consumer to digest as we go through the rest of this year.
So again, why the time has come for value stocks?
Well, value stocks have been actually performing quite well since the Q3 of 2020. So it's not a new phenomenon this year. And we have to just be careful what value actually means. Because at the moment, if you look at a lot of value equity funds, you can see that their top holdings are in IT and healthcare, which most people, if you look at your textbooks, wouldn't necessarily consider those to be value sectors. So from our perspective, we can see that the value cycle will look very different this year. And actually, if I think about that, financials have actually been outperforming since Q3, outperforming technology since Q3 of 2020. So, these are the types of things that we're looking for. And we think that, at Robeco, we are really focusing on not just value, but also the decarbonisation of value. So focusing on companies that have lower carbon footprints within the value structure. So again, there are twists within that question that we're really focused on at Robeco.
On another hand, investors need to embrace climate adaptation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We saw that the IPCC report recently isn't talking about if the sea levels will rise 2 meters. It's talking about when it happens. So therefore, we need to really focus on how do we enable climate transition away from carbon-producing companies to a more sustainable green future. And this is particularly important because 300 million people around the world live within 2 meters of sea level, and 60% of those are in Asia. So if we think about what comes out of Asia in terms of our economies, in terms of goods and services, then it's very important that we tackle climate change and rising sea levels. And action is required, and governments need to be at the forefront of this. And we've seen that at COP26 with agreements around carbon offsets and carbon taxes. We think that governments have the biggest impact. We've seen that Maersk is starting to use wind turbines on their boats, on their ships, and you're also seeing countries banning plastic bags and various other disposable items. So for us, government policy is very important, and the engagement with governments is important as well.
Colin Graham, responsable de Estrategias multiactivos de Robeco. Thank you very much for your time. Good day and good business.
Thank you very much.